Call this Joint Finance Committee, Public Works Committee meeting to order. This meeting and all their meetings of this committee are open to the public. Proper notice has been posted and given to the press in accordance with Wisconsin statutes, so the citizenry may be aware of the time, place, and agenda of the meeting. Roll call.
So for the Public Works Committee, Gunderson,
Here.
Nadowski,
Here.
Brunner,
Here.
and for the Finance Committee, Rasmussen,
Here.
Gunderson,
Here.
Appleby.
Here.
All here.
Oh, here. So discussion and possible action on the park restroom landscaping project.
Yes, this is an item that we had brought up at the Public Works meeting last week. We talked about the brand new restroom, and after excavating, building the restroom, and then re-landscaping, we had found that a lot of junk and garbage had been floating to the surface in the area, and it was found out later through community discussions that that's the site of an old dumping ground, and I think the park was back from 1970, so it's stuff from before the park yet. This spring now, after last winter, after the last two seasons now, we've had a lot of stuff keep floating up. What we did at the Public Works level was solicit some quotes on getting some excavation to tear out maybe a foot, 6 inches to a foot of the soil that is in there now, put in new soil, plant some seed, or put in sod in order to spur the growth. The Public Works Committee had held on this item, basically looking to get a quote on like a barrier to install before we put in brand new dirt. We did get Fox Brothers to update their quote, but I am waiting on one or potentially two other excavators to update it. We had it on here because it's an urgent item. We'd like to get this all done before Memorial Day, but knowing that with the City Hall and the treatment plant project, we probably have meetings. I hate to say a meeting every week, but we can probably plan on a meeting every week. And so knowing that there's a couple quotes out there yet, I think we can wait a week on this, and we probably should.
Okay, question.
Yes.
Is that what they update, even though the date says last year, that last item on there, is that what they updated?
Yeah.
It's in place, that's what they added on, because I didn't remember that from before.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I understand it must be a barrier, I'm just not familiar with non-woven. When you hear woven or non-woven, you think woven's stronger. I mean, it's just a concept, but,
Yeah, it's a filter fabric is what was proposed by Fox Brothers. These were the dates of the initial quotes. It was last July. What they did is they updated their quote. I believe they backed down. They had 9,500 square feet of soil to take out and put back in, and sod too. Thad and I went out and just measured it up to make sure we were looking at the right amount. It was closer to 8,000 square feet than 9,500, so there was a little backing down on that. And then also the filtered fabric. Now we talked at Public Works about potentially the Weyauwega product that we used maybe 5-6 years ago by the storm drainage area. The city actually still has a good chunk of that Weyauwega, but with that, the thought is that's more of a honeycomb. It's more of a preventing erosion or runoff than it is a filter to try to block anything down. Because with that, we'd probably have to put rock in, and then with the rock, then you'd have to put soil on. Probably dig a little bit deeper to get the rock in. There's probably more cost in that.
so what they're saying here, you agree with that non-woven is
Yeah, woven,
somewhat of
non-woven
a
is just,
barrier?
they're putting a separator in there. And then they're allowing, the water will percolate through it. But they're just putting a separator in there to, keep the material from coming up.
So that's what their guarantee?
Yeah, it should,
Is-
that should be, shouldn't be a problem with that.
Yeah. Yep. So again, we are waiting. There's one, maybe two more contractors said they would get me a quote. We turned this around pretty quick with the addition of the fabric, or at least some kind of barrier. So again, it's on here. Hoping we had them, we could get going on it, but a week should be good yet. So okay.
Number 3, the review of bid results for contract B15, utility road construction.
Yep, so B15 is the utility and road construction. It's a sanitary sewer with a patch on 3rd Avenue to assist with AgriPure. And then it's also water, sanitary sewer, roadway and intersection improvements, which includes curb and gutter for Lakeshore Drive, or a portion of Lakeshore Drive. That would be to assist with the potential development or further development of the subway property. There's talk about a gas station that's been there for a while. This contract covers that. Thad is here for the next 3 items because we did bid out 3 projects. So he'll give you a rundown on the bid results. I don't anticipate there's going to be action tonight on any of these 3. It's more informational, but we'll give you probably the next steps when Thad runs through everything.
Right, there was three contractors bidding the work. All of them are qualified to do the work, and you can see the 2 low bidders, there was only $1,600 between the 2. So those, that tells me that they're good and tight bids. And then the next one was a little out of whack, but the 2 low bidders are reputable firms to work with, and I don't have a problem with working with DeGroat as a low bidder for the work that they quoted.
So there's 2 projects within here. Again, one's 3rd Avenue, the other one is Lakeshore Drive. The thought with 3rd Avenue is that there are some issues with some backup at 3rd Avenue with the main, so we'd like to get that going sooner if we can. We're looking probably within 2-3 weeks we'd get going on construction for that. That's assuming that within a week here we would award it. The other part of that is related to Lakeshore Drive. There is a proposed developers agreement that's out there with a cost breakdown, which the proposed cost breakdown, we've had a verbal agreement on it, and then we've gotten an email, but we do want to get an agreement that basically says, okay, for this $130,000 project, that whether any development occurs there or not, that there's an agreement in place that the city doesn't take on $130,000 in project without getting properly reimbursed. There's some thoughts there. Right now, we're working through a breakdown or a share with that. There will be a closed session tomorrow night with the reorganizational meeting. Attorney Kelney is going to be here to talk about railroad litigation in one closed session, and then we're going to talk about this agreement and next steps tomorrow night too. And then from there, then we'll take a look at awarding this construction and whether we need to award with both projects to go forward, or one, or maybe stagger them where we do one and then get another one later. But we will talk a little bit more about that one tomorrow night. Any questions on that at all?
With these bids, does the price change if you choose one or the other? Or are they broken down so that it wouldn't?
We've talked to them a little bit there. If you don't do them together, probably, and then there could probably be some mobilization fees if they've got to bring equipment more than one time.
Yeah, if you award the work and we do the work on 3rd Avenue right away to get it done, and then there's some issues with developer holding up, and then they come back in within the next month or 2, there will be a mobilization fee between to move the guy back in, because he can move here once and do all the work. And then his subcontractors will have a small mobilization fee too. So we talked to them about that, and they'd like to do it all at once, and they understand, but they'll work with us however they can.
Any other questions?
That was my only question.
Okay. And review of bid results for contract A15 wastewater treatment plant modifications.
Again, I don't anticipate that we'll take any action on this one. It's going to be informational, and then we'll send it to Thad again.
Okay, we opened bids same day last week, and we had 4 bidders on the wastewater treatment plant project. The low bidder at this point in time is Myron Construction at $5,059,000. CD Smith is at $5.378 million. Howard Emmels at $6.22, and Waukesha is at $7 million. If you remember, a year and a half ago, we bid the project and rejected the bids. At that point in time, The project came in at $4.492 million, so it's $500,000 more right now. Same project, we added a generator and a septic receiving station, and we reduced the water main. We had the water main we built last year. It was in the treatment plant project, but we took it out of there and moved it into and already constructed. So there is a little bit of an increase, and as you look at the alternative deducts, you can see that the generator, which is deductive alternate number 2, is about, it averages $65,000 to $80,000 to do that work. So you can look at that and kind of get a feel for what that is. The septic receiving, the estimate on that was $75,000 to $80,000. The water main project was $75,000 to $80,000, so those are kind of a wash. So when we did bid it, we did talk with the city about it, and we came up with the 4 alternative deducts that we have listed here, and everybody quoted on them. And you're allowed to accept any of these deducts in order to lower the price if we need to. But you have to take them in order. So the number 1 deduct would be the phosphorus analyzer, then it would go to the standby generator, clarifier launder covers. What those are where the water goes around the outside of the clarifier, the covers that keep the algae from growing and so forth, so less maintenance on the project. And then the 4th alternate is to deduct any of the work at the sludge dewatering building and the piece of equipment that goes in there. So that gives you the 4 listed alternatives. Keep in mind with the deductive alternate number 2, which is the generator, if you were to select that, there is a $15,000 to $20,000 cost from Weyauwega to bring in a secondary feed and transformer. So the cost that we have deleted here is only the cost from the contractor to do the work. So we have them putting a generator out there on the base bid. If we take the generator, we have a transfer switch with it, but if we take the generator away, transfer switch stays and the secondary feed comes in from Weyauwega. Weyauwega will provide a second feed to the treatment plant, but their comment is they can't guarantee that they'll be out of. You may lose power from both stations. You know, it's happened before, but it's 2 different power feeds coming from 2 different substations, and if one of them goes down, the other one can kick in, and then there is a secondary way to bring that one that goes down up. So we've talked about this for a while. We felt that with the base bid to go with the generator, we designed it, put it into the project, so we got competitive bids, and then now we're looking at, you know, with the wastewater treatment plant, again, Patrick said no discussion only tonight, no selections. So that's where we sit with the treatment plant. We're 1.5 years later, and we did, you know, as you can see, there's about a 10% increase, and what we heard prior to the bidding for all the construction projects is there's a labor shortage in the area that's causing the increase in prices, and 10% increase over a year and a half, 2 years is, you know, we saw it coming with when we rejected the bids before.
Just to add on that, so the cost for the treatment plant, when you look at the alternates on the treatment plant, they're deducts, so it's options you can reduce. When we get to the city hall one next, those are additions, so the difference there is that you'd be adding to the cost. As it relates to the cost overruns on the treatment plant, we've been in discussion with Agri-Peer because 1.5 years ago when we bid out the project, they came to us and said, basically asked us to hold off or to reject the bids because, as you see now, there was a little bit of a change in their plans. With that, we'd been in discussions with them that we'd like to get this addressed, that any costs that are resulting from just rejecting 1.5 years ago, you know, the city could have gone forward and just pushed the project through. We held up. In the end, we really bid out short, you know, outside of the generator and the septic receiving. This is essentially the same project that we put out. So the increase of about $500,000, the good news is we know it's $500,000 and it's at least a number we can go back to Agri-Peer and say, okay, well, we talked about would there be costs that would be incurred by the city because we put it off. Well, now we start to know what those costs are, and we've been in touch with Agri-Peer probably every day. I would think that, and I were over there today on some things, and the discussion continues on that. There is the next step for the treatment plant would be taking a look at these bids, looking at awarding them, and then once they're awarded, you'd look into like a construction management or construction administration, and that we're not going to take up tonight at all. We'll take that one up in the next week, 2 weeks. So, okay. Any questions on that?
What does that mean when there's labor shortage? They don't have enough employees, so everybody has to work harder, or they have to sub it out and it costs more?
Labor shortage, what I've been hearing is, there's not enough, people out there to do the work.
Right, so they have to sub it out at more of an expense? or
Sub
what?
it out at more of an expense, or what
Instead of
I
Myron, like say having their own employees, now they have to hire somebody up.
hire someone else, or what I've been hearing too also is there's, a lot of these guys have work where they're having to put their guys on overtime in order to catch up.
Okay,
You know,
so I meant work harder and,
yeah, we saw that last year at the end of the year, or summer and fall with, the utility contractors, they got so much work that they had to work their guys 50, 60 hours a week
Yeah.
in order to catch up, so they could catch up with the bids that they were securing and get them started on time.
Okay.
So the next projects down the road are the ones that are absorbing those overages, because the other ones are already bid.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. Review of bid results for contract C15, the Municipal Building.
So this would be, the Municipal Building is what it's the name on the street for the City Hall, Community Center, that renovation project. Again, we've got a couple other items on the agenda. The bids here are one piece of the formula and what the cost would be and what the effort will be with this project. The next couple items relate to technology, furniture, those kind of costs. So we'll get into that a little bit after this, but we'll kick it to Thad to review the three bidders in there.
Again, on this one, we had 3 contractors bid the work. Howard Emmel, Myron, and Cardinal Construction. And as you can see, I feel that pretty competitive bids with Howard Emmel and Myron Construction being $23,000 apart on a $2.5 million job is less than 1%, so it's pretty close. So, again, as Patrick had said before, the alternative deducts, these are all adders that we put in there as we discussed at our meeting several weeks ago about, we brought up these items about what it would cost to do certain additional things to the project, and those were listed in here as all adders.
I got a question for that. On that number 5 alternative bid, Emil is $100,000 higher than the other 2. If we do go that way, does that put his bid way out?
If you were to select that option,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
but I think what happened there is they included the entire cost for the roof instead of the differential between a 20 and a 30-year. Because you can see
Warranty,
Cardinal
yeah.
and Myron were right next to
Yeah.
each other.
That's what I was wondering too, if they somehow,
So I think they just put the entire cost instead of the difference.
I think we'd have to address that with them or something. I don't think.
If you select that option, then we'd have to
Yeah.
deal with it.
So you have a couple of them that are on both sheets. Has there been discussion about if you award both projects, what potential cost savings there are from that?
The projects were not set up that way. We felt that when they put their bid in, that they would reflect that in. That's why we separated them time-wise. I think you can see that in the treatment plant bid, because that was the last bid, and that was $300,000 cheaper than the next bidder.
Okay.
It's hard to tie them together.
Yep, I was just
Yeah,
curious if there
Yeah,
was
give a discount.
opportunities there or not.
Right.
and again, we had talked about we saw the increase on the treatment plant cost, and the estimate we had for this was just short of 2.4 million for construction, so we're looking, and there is some tax credits, you know, on the City Hall project. However, those aren't known until you figure out all the items that you purchased, then they have to credit us the tax.
Big thing we've talked about is we've had a rundown or an estimate for total project cost, and I know I had brought it up a couple times, and we talked about it quite a bit, that those were estimates that we had. And with those estimates, we had, you know, levels between 2.2, 2.5 for total project costs million. And the big thing we had out there was until you bid it out, you don't really know for sure what the cost would be. And again, you look at these bid amounts, and what you've got is 2.63 or 2.65 million as a base, and the other items, you know, you probably raise anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 if you would pick any of these options that are on here. And there'll be a time when we go through these a little bit more. But the big thing is, we've had the estimates that we've talked about. I think you've talked about estimates probably 7-8 years here, and what we've been putting together and what went out for bid, we've been working on for 2 years, and we kept putting everything together, and we knew at the end that, well, you'll find out what that cost may be. The key is we get the construction bids. 2.6 million is probably going to equate to a total project somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million. I'm thinking it could be up to $3.2 million. But there's a lot of options that we've got, a lot of alternates. And when we're done reviewing this part of it, there's an awful lot of options for technology, security, and furniture. And you can go as low or as high as you want with those. But I think the big thing to put out there, to get out there, is we're looking at, you know, the project we put together and had meetings on and put out for bid. It's $3 million. $3 million, and then it's, you know, some wiggle room yet. Some of the other things we've got on here are potential project financing. We have been looking into grants, assistance.
When will we kind of know the impact on what the taxes will be for, say, like the individual?
We'll get there when we talk about the financing. So yep. Because I've got an estimate on that. I don't have it fully pulled together, but we got an estimate on that too.
Okay.
So
I had a question too on item 4. It just says cost for lockers and installation. Those numbers all seem high just for lockers and installation, if that's all that really additionally is.
I believe those are the
for the
lockers
police.
in the for the police.
Yeah.
In their evidence room area,
Yeah.
and then down in the locker room for the showers.
I thought that was a little high also. I mean, it's just, we're probably only talking 5 or 6 lockers.
I don't know if they're specialized in some way or anything like that.
Well, we just gotta know what we really have before we say it's too high or too low, you know?
Right.
We don't know
Yeah,
what,
that's what I'm asking.
I mean-
That's what we're here for now.
yeah, we see 3 school lockers in a row, and boy, that's a lot for
Yeah.
that, but yeah, we don't know what, so we need to break down what that really is, or pictures.
Yep. One of the things I'll put out there too is, you know, we've got options on lockers. We didn't really put too much in for furniture at all, but we do have something in there for the display cases as one of the alternates, but from the moment we put this out for bid, we've been getting contacted by, there's 3-4 locker companies that just came and said, hey, we just do lockers and we see you're doing a building, so, you know, there's an option there too that we might not be locked in so much with going with whoever Myron or Immel had selected. There's a lot of people that aren't maybe connected so much in, but are still interested in offering us.
Yeah, I guess just on some of the alternative items,
Work.
that would be kind of some of my questions, just what exactly is that?
Sure. And we've got specs on it too. It's, and this is probably more of a higher level overview of,
Okay.
you know,
And if you add up to 2 rows of adders there, one is 202,000 and one is 71,000. It's a big difference, $130,000 difference in cost of the adders.
Oh, yeah, because of that 137 on the,
Right. If that's a wrong amount, it might not be that much of a difference.
yeah, that would take quite a bit off. There's still some of those though, yeah, what they're quoting on some of those additions are pretty radically different.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
I got one. Do we have flexibility on the add-ons with the other 2 companies that quoted?
I'd check with that on that. Maybe clarify that too, what you're looking
Yeah,
for
we'll do
flexibility.
Because you've got your base quotes up on top,
Yes.
and then you've got your add-ons, and when you start picking those apart, and I look over to the far right-hand column to Cardinal Construction, I see that there is some pricing there that seems to be much more economical than what, say, for example, Howard Immel is offering to do the work for, and I'm wondering if we have the flexibility to go to Cardinal for these, some of these add-ons. You know,
Yeah, but then, and it's like a scale, look how, the bottom line, you know, I mean, some is more on Immel, but then when you look at the big picture, but they're less than, you know.
Yeah, they're
Right.
kind of
So
all over
it's-
the map on.
And you
different
kinda
items.
wonder, yeah, what the heck, but
I guess on,
With such a difference on Cardinal and the other 2 low bidders, I think Cardinal is probably not in consideration. But when you go to changing, you know, selecting things here with the other 2 low bidders, it gets a little closer because there's some spreads on some of them.
I just took that 137 out and added in 21 just to be equal with the other 2.
what'd you get?
And then Immel's 86,700 and Myron is 71,000, so there's still about,
So $10,000 difference, and then your $23,000 difference, so Immel still is 13,000 cheaper. Now, the thing is when you have the deducts in here, you don't know where they're putting their money, you know, or how much the adders are. We tried to get a apples for apples comparison, spelled out what the deducts were, what needed to be in them. It's a little different it's difficult to figure out exactly what they had into it, although if we wanted to, we could sit down and talk with the low bidder and ask him and see what's available, but
And like, from my perspective, do we really need display cases? Which if you took it off Immel's, there's another 34,000.
well, that's an adder, that doesn't.
Right,
It's
that's,
not on there.
well, I mean, if you're,
Oh, if you-
everybody's
if you look at it,
still
yeah,
comparing,
yeah.
yeah.
no, I do think for some.
If
things
you were
that-
going with it, we don't need it, put it that way.
Yeah.
I think one of the big things too is as you look at these additions, what you're looking at here is, so you asked would you be interested in providing this? And if we wanted it and we get it from the bidder, here's what it would cost. Now, like on lockers, if you don't decide to accept that with these bids, that doesn't mean that we can't have lockers in the building. It just means that the
Right.
general is not gonna be providing those.
Yep.
So we can have some more discussion on that too. Typically, the thought is, if you want these things here, you already have somebody that's coming and
Right.
but they're alternates for a reason. That means that you have the choice to decide whether you want them and whether you want your low bidder to take them on for you. Does that help?
So maybe we should just forget all about the add-ons if they're not that, so maybe the 30-year, just forget about them, and if we see we got some money, then we can hire out if need be, Well, we'd need lockers for sure from somebody else. I mean, as far as for the evidence room kind of thing, but.
I think what you'll probably want to do is take a look at the technology, security, furniture, and probably look at the whole picture with these. And we'll get into technology in that next. Because basically the technology, security, and the furniture is not as formal as this, but it's basically going to be like a shopping list. What would you like on? What might it cost? What don't you want?
Anything else? Anybody? Well, then we'll move on to discussion on the technology, security, and furniture.
Yep. So we've talked at finance about the technology. There's a couple things that we need to do as a city or as a city hall, regardless of whether the city hall project moves forward. One of them is the server. We have a server that, quite honestly, we probably should have replaced a few years ago, but we got some extra life out of it. But we are looking at replacing it anyway. And on top of that, when we replace that, we also need to probably be looking at the city hall building or the municipal building if we're running new systems that we don't have in our current building. So electronic door locks, potentially security cameras, audio visual, if the police department's got some more technology for interviews and things like that. So we do have two companies that have been offering proposals. One of them is Heartland, is who we work with now, or who at least services our network and server now. The other one is Corporate Network Solutions, and they are they're in Appleton. A lot of them are right in the valley, but Heartland has recently done the Little Chute Village Hall, which is one of them that staff had toured. Jerry, myself, Thad, Brandon. We took a look at their boardroom, their technology, security, the whole works. Heartland did that one. Corporate Network Solutions had been one of the lead technology contractors for the village of Hortonville. And Hortonville in 2013 had basically built a brand new village hall, community room, boardroom, basically everything we're looking at doing, but they started from scratch and they added a library on it too. So Corporate Network Solutions had done some of that, and the good news is we've got two buildings that are within the last year, they've been completed or opened, and we've had local references, and it's people that, between Jerry, the police department, and myself, we deal with Hortonville and Little Chute on some level anyway, so that's been pretty good. Basically what we're looking at right now is Corporate Network Solutions and Heartland had proposed two different systems at first, and what we're trying to do is, knowing that they both offer HP or Hewlett-Packard technology, in general they're both offering the same products. It's just a matter of lining them up to see what their quotes are together. We should have that by the end of the week here. On top of that, we're looking at what their installation costs are and also what their service rates are and what their staff and availability is in case we've got problems. How quick do they get back to you? We're looking at that. That should be ready, I'm hoping, for next week. We're doing the same with the RFQ that we put out, which is basically requesting technology firms to give their qualifications and provide a rough estimate. And we had 3 components that we wanted them to quote on. And it was basically for a brand new cabling, network cabling for the building. So when we renovate our building, make sure that everybody that needs to be connected to the network is able to plug in. We did the cabling. We did get quotes from Globalcom Technologies, which is out of the Brookfield, Milwaukee area. We got a quote from and a proposal from Heartland. And then we also got one from R&R Technologies, which is in Kaukauna. So there's 3 companies there. Those range from $25,000 to $50,000 for cabling, depending on how much you want to build out. So there's some wiggle room there for price. The other component that we've got is electronic door locks and security cameras. And we did get 3 proposals for that. We got Globalcom Technologies again. We got Complete Control, which is out of central Wisconsin. And then we got Heartland. And those for the cameras, I believe all 3 companies had basically quoted the same cost. We're in the $20,000 to $25,000 range for cameras. And we are for door locks in the $30,000 to $40,000 range for 22 door locks. One of our options there could be cutting back on the number of doors that have an electronic lock on them. So that is basically, that part of it's basically pulled together. It's just a matter of how much security cameras and how many door locks do you want electronic. The third piece then would be the boardroom audio visual. So when we sit here, we have a camcorder, we've got wireless mics, everybody sort of runs on their battery on their laptops. We could continue this in a brand new building, in a brand new boardroom, and it would be pretty low cost. Or there are options to power that up, provide a speaker, microphone system, hearing assistance, video technology, in case we'd ever want to have electronic presentations. And we did get 2 quotes for that, or 2 proposals. One was again from Heartland, who you'll see the theme. Heartland is the one company that quoted everything. And then we also have R&R Technologies out of Kaukauna. Basically what we're doing is checking the references on them, taking a look at what the rough estimate might be. Within a week, week and a half, what I'd like to do, hopefully it's next week, have you guys review all of the contractors willing to do all those components with the server included, and then select vendors. Maybe not select your final system yet, but select the vendors that you want to work with. And once we round up the City Hall project, and once we start to take a look at either your target cost or your target project, then we'll start to firm up how many doors, how many cameras, if at all, that kind of thing. Now with furniture, basically we've had about a $50,000 allowance built into the City Hall, to the bid that we put out there, or an allowance, not in the bid, but an allowance in the estimated cost. So we've had probably 5, 6 different companies that have called and have said, hey, we do furniture for offices. We would like to sit down with you, and quite honestly, that's probably a discussion for in the next couple months, because what we're looking at there is furnishing the office once it's fully built out. So right now, those are some of the unknown costs. We know who the vendors might be for technology security furniture, but that's an area that when we say that this project might be $3 million, that total is going to be affected by what you do with technology security furniture. Any questions on that? I mean, it's a rough overview. You'll get more details, I'm hoping within a week here. We'll get them to you. Mainly it's just trying to match up, making sure everybody's saying that they can do what the other companies say that they can do. Making sure that we're comparing apples to another similar fruit. Maybe not apples, but close. Okay?
All right. Any other questions, comments, discussion? All right. And let's move on to the project financing.
Okay, so getting a better idea on what the project might be. When we talked to Ellers, probably last fall, we were looking at financing $2 or $2.2 million. Because our construction estimates are $2.6 million, there's a chance that we will be looking at borrowing potentially more than that. Now, we are looking into grants. We haven't talked so much about how much we would pay down up front. The city has set aside money over the years, and we have a capital fund to help pay some of these costs. But basically what I had called Ellers about was once we got these construction estimates, I had said, well, how about you take a look at $2.6 to $3 million, what an impact might be for borrowing. And they did preliminarily take a look at those numbers. If you're looking at $3 million, essentially your annual payment to start would be in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000 on what you'd be paying down in your debt. It's variable there because we would have to go out and award interim financing up front, and then you'd get your money when the construction bills start coming in within the first couple months. After that, then you would look at refinancing with your regular financing, which could be 6 to 10 months down the road. We've got real rough numbers on what that cost might be, what the impact might be on the taxpayer, or what an impact might be as it relates to your taxes. We'll get those numbers, but again, the big thing is we still don't have a total that says this project will cost X and you need to borrow Y. One of the big comments I would make is when you look at borrowing for a project like this, we're not going to be authorized to raise taxes to cover the debt on the City Hall project. So what that means is we may get a number that says X, for a $100,000 home, the impact would be X. That's not new money that comes to that home. That's money that they're already paying in taxes. And the decision there would be, what are you not paying for that would help you pay for this? And I've got some preliminary illustrations that show you that right now we're paying about $200,000 on debt a year. So out of our $1.8 million budget, we're paying about $200,000 in debt. We also set aside $300,000 a year for capital projects. With that, that's about $500,000 that either we're paying off borrowing to build roads and build buildings, or we're setting money aside to pay for those things. Looking out at the next couple of years, our debt load is about $200,000 for the next 3 years. That includes 2015. Next year it'll be about $200,000. 2017 it's going to be a little bit about $200,000, $210,000. In 2018 our current debt then drops down to $50,000. So honestly, I could tell you that the toughest part of my job in looking at how we piece this together is going to be the next 2 years. Our debt will tail off, and a lot of times when you plan out your debt or you plan your borrowings, you'll look out and say, how do you try to maintain a steady debt payment? So $200,000 might be a number we've been going off of for the last couple of years. That's already in the budget. So $200,000 isn't a big impact at all. So like I said, 2017 is the last year of our $200,000 currently, and then it starts cutting down by 2022, 2023. All the debt we've got out right now is paid off. So it'll just be an exercise in trying to smooth out whenever we get to a final number, whenever we find out how much we're going to borrow, how do we pay for that? And it's going to be a mix of how much do you pay down up front, how much do you borrow, what's grants. But that's a lot of info. The big thing we wanted to get done tonight was to just run over what were the bids, because you find out what this might cost, or at least you start to get some things that are more concrete. And then you can start to build towards how do you finance this. The long explanation to get to the short answer is, well, we're working on it. Any questions on that?
Yes, Pat, what would be, just I'll shoot whatever average number you got there, what would be like an amortization time?
Yeah, so we're looking,
15, 20 years, 30 years, what are you looking at?
it depends on the program that you use. If you use general obligation notes, that would be a 10-year borrowing with an a balloon payment in the 10th year, so you'd have to refinance after 9.5 years. There are programs through the state property fund that you can borrow out of. And there's also the Department of, is it Agriculture, Thad, that's got USDA?
Rural development, yes.
Has a program where you could look out 20, 30, 40 years. Some of the interest rates vary between whatever the variable rate might be on the market, 2 to 3. Some of the programs through rural development and the property fund get up to 3, 4%. The one thing that the city council did take a look at last fall before we started moving to this point was the general obligation bonds are the 20-year bonds, and that was one thing that we didn't completely rule out, but the city council made a motion and said we would not like to consider that financing mechanism.
I guess money's cheap right now, basically, in the 2 and 3% if
Yep.
that's available, that's good then.
Yep.
Are these cost, from Cedar Corp, you know, about 140,000, right, for managing, et cetera, is that part of what we'd borrow, or do we try to take care of that on monies? You don't wanna add that on, do you?
Well, there's a couple things, we'll have to take a look at that because you've got, with the construction management or construction administration, we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow night. But it's monies that, or it's expense that we'll incur as we're building the project, so it's just a matter of all the costs that come in. How do you pay for those going forward? A lot of the design fees and a lot of your studies that you've done over the years, we've just paid for so far.
Right.
So it ends up being, you know, any construction, any fees you incur from here on, you would want to maybe consider including in your borrowing amount.
And that's what I wondered, if we had monies to, you said we had set aside some,
Yep.
so do we use that instead of every dollar that goes on loan, of course?
We
you know,
could.
It's how much more than $1?
We could. One thing I will point out is, so we're doing the East Alfred Street project, or we're sharing with the county. That's about a $900,000 project, and the city's share has been about $300,000, and we didn't borrow for that at all. So that's one thing where we took out of our funds on hand. Really, in the end, the way you look at capital projects like that is we've got money on hand, and we've got projects we can pay out of our money on hand, and we also have projects that will come up that we may have to borrow for. And with City Hall, you probably have the question come up on technology and the server. You know, the server is something that we maybe should do anyway, but if it's related to City Hall, we should maybe consider borrowing for that too, depending on where the costs come in at.
Of
But
course,
yeah.
I'd like to say our bottom line is that we consider being frugal on, I think we can deal with this kind of setup if we know that we can have something better, and technology is changing so much. What we pay $1,000 for might be 500 5 years down the road, and maybe even better at 500. You know, so not to think we have to have it all now.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
the new fashioned way, not the old fashioned way.
Yep. So really, any costs that we may incur, it's all on the table, whether you want to borrow for it or try to pay it down front. It's to be determined.
Would you rather buy that new server right up front and get that in and get working on that instead of waiting for all this other stuff to come together? Don't
So-
you really?
So segue to the next item.
Okay.
And that'll be the first thing I talk about with the next item. So it's the temporary office setup if we move out. So
Any other questions on the financing? No? All right, then let's move into the temporary city hall and police office.
yep. Basically, we've identified one location to move all of the employees that work out of the city hall building right now. So city hall and the police too. We can move them. It's the old Studio 123 building that Steve Levy owns. To jump real quick to the server question, quite honestly, when we move out, if we find out when we're moving out of City Hall, I would prefer that we've already made the decision on a server and that we instead of tearing down our old system, building that and then trying to replace it, because we'll probably be in the temporary portion for 10 to 12 months, it would be nice just to start from scratch and build that new server. And then that saves some time on Heartland or Corporate Network Solutions or whoever we select. They've got to come out and set it up multiple times, and if we move what we've got, they've got to come out and move that too and take it down and put it together. And the comment we've gotten on a schedule for server is that from the moment that you know you're going to buy a server, it's probably about a month to the time, 2 weeks to order it, 2 weeks to set it up, and then you're good to go. So the thought would be, whenever we get the go ahead, if we're moving forward with the project, if we start to get an idea on the schedule for the project, it's probably going to be best that we're out of City Hall and we've got a location that's saved for us, and it's really, quite honestly, probably the last location in town that we can all stay together, we can all stay downtown, and we can all be relatively cheaply converted into a usable office space. And when I say relatively cheaply, we got a couple quotes from Backwoods Construction, which is a preferred contractor of Steve Leby. At first we looked at putting in some new walls, some plastering, a couple offices, and something of a secure corridor up front so that we still had a secure lobby area for customers to come in and be funneled to where they need to go. The costs on that were $18,000 to $20,000, and without talking to Steve any further on that, not knowing if the city was going to have to front that, spend money on a place that maybe we'd be in 10 months and then move out right away. We did scale that back down to be more of a bare essentials type office setup, and we got that down to roughly a fraction of that cost. But again, we do need to talk a little bit more with Steve. He's willing to work with the city. It's very clear, and I'll make this clear on our end, that we had contacted Steve and said, hey, is there any interest in this building? We see that you have it, you're not using it now. It's not something that Steve came to us and said, hey, let me get you into my building. I know that's something that he mentioned, that he's doing it for all the right reasons, and we're happy that he's willing to do that too. There's a couple things that we would have to do with the temporary city hall. One would be the server we'd have to take a look at. The other one would be the SCADA system, the water system alarm. Right now it is in City Hall, and right now we also have the sewer, the treatment plant portion in the treatment plant. We have one company that services the SCADA system in City Hall, and with that being said, the one company is probably the preferred company that you go with to pick it up and lay it again at the treatment plant. And we're looking in the $6,000 to $7,000 range for them to tear that apart, put it at the treatment plant. Because of that cost, it's something that we absolutely have to get out of City Hall because we need it running. But until the day we find out that we're moving forward with City Hall and we're moving out of the building, it doesn't make sense for you to authorize $6,000 to $7,000 yet. Now, eventually the thought is we'll get it down to the treatment plant, but for now, it's something that, if it has to wait a week or two before it's authorized, it's probably a good thing. Eventually we're going to move that out of City Hall anyway. But
Right.
Another little thing that we've got is in a bare bones temporary City Hall. Basically it would be an open concept where we'd try to use some of our cubicles, and then we probably would have enough room that we could have committee meetings if we needed them in this building. That would help with me not having to haul paper around, but the layout and the availability is to be determined because we don't have enough room like you've got here for sure. So that's one thing we'll still take a look at. Other than that, the only other piece that's out there is we are looking into police furniture because the police department in the new building would look at adding 3 to 4 new workstations compared to what we have now. And what we looked at was if we move to a temporary city hall and the concept is an open cube type setup, does it make sense that there might be some furniture we could buy up front that we could move into the temporary area and then move into a new building? we're looking at that too, but it's real brief. Obviously, there's been, as you see on this agenda, there's a lot that's been going on. A lot of information to throw at you, but the big thing is we wanted to make sure that everybody knows with these projects what the costs were. We'll get it out, get it online, and over the next couple of weeks we'll hammer down on these projects. So, worst thing we'd want to have is Frank and Jack and a couple of people that come here. You just don't want people to think, well, you didn't get an adequate update to the public on what's going on. When you're looking at $9-10 million in projects, it's certainly a big deal. That I want to make sure we're transparent, and I think we are. And that's all I've got. Like I said, there's really no action on anything, so maybe it feels like we didn't do a lot, but established a record anyway, and it's just one more step in the process.
Wow, guess we did. Action that. Any other questions, comments on that last one?
Thank you, Patrick, for all that information.
Yep, and that too. Yep.
That too, yeah.
That too as well,
Yep.
yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just see a lot of meetings for all that stuff to try to boil down all that.
Well, there's been
All that stuff on the perimeter that you gotta draw into the whole, and
yeah.
Perimeter stuff's what it's gonna get.
And just remember, we don't, we just think we need everything right away, and if it can be installed later, instead of, oh, it's gotta be because of the construction, how it happens.
Yep.
I mean, I know it is, you build a new house for someone and they gotta have new furniture, because that's how it works these days, but.
Yep.
The difference
But-
of wants and needs is what you're
But,
saying.
well, yeah, and, but.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
There's a
So-
certain point of respect of the people working and the functionality of like police and knowing what they need to really do their job, So aware of that kind of stuff too, but
Yep. And I should just add on there the caveat that while there's a $50,000 furniture item in the cost estimates, that doesn't mean that we've got a mandate to spend $50,000. I mean, that's, especially with the costs as what we're looking at, it's going to be, we're going to look hard at it. We worked with Attorney Kelly to make sure that with the technology and security that we weren't officially bidding it out, because you have a lot more flexibility than what you'll see with the construction. Really what we want to do with technology is try to identify firms, and then if, say for instance, our boardroom audio video remains something similar to this, well, you can say no and not be locked in either way, I've been watching the clock, so we're still good. Told my wife 7 o'clock. She didn't believe me.
Anybody make a motion to adjourn?
If we're done and there's nothing more.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 6:58 PM.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.